Star Trek rant. So, yeah, in case you didn't already know that I'm a big nerd, I own this shirt. Yeah, and it's got all the reasons, or the things that I learned from Star Trek, if you want to pause the video and read them. Okay. Also have these lovely postcards that I'm probably gonna frame at some point. Anyways, yeah, we watched all the Star Trek movies, just about. Discussed that in the grouping that the one we had to miss is. But yeah, I'm going to be breaking them up, like for each crew. Like there's going to be one video, this one, about next generation, or about classic, and then another video about next generation, and finally the Kelvin universe, or timeline, I should say. So if you want to watch all three, go for it. I figured not everybody's going to want to hear everything about each crew set, so thought I would break it up. Anyways, so Star Trek the Motion Picture. It's a long movie. First of all, what were they thinking with the uniforms in the film? Like, they change from scene to scene. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for the colors. Like, sometimes someone will be wearing tan, and then the next scene they'll be wearing light blue. And none of it is, like, looks good on anyone. It all looks ugly. By the way, the production designer was Harold Michelson, who was the guy Fiona's dad was named after in Shrek 2. So it's a little tie-in with previous rant. It's like these are planned. Anyways, the movie was directed by Robert Wise, who also directed Day the Earth Stood Still and Sound of Music, as well as many other films, like great films. Just in case you thought this movie sucked, it's not because he's a bad director. Like, he's good at other films. There's a transporter accident about 20 minutes into the movie, which I had forgotten, blocked out. Like, no wonder McCoy's afraid of that technology. It should be well established at this point, and there's just an accident, just with, like, a routine beaming. It hardly inspires confidence. Like, yeah, that was a little jarring to watch, having forgotten it completely. Sonak, the Vulcan who died in the accident, was actually a holdover from our earlier draft. This Star Trek the Motion Picture was originally supposed to be a pilot for a next generation of characters, and when Star Wars came out, Paramount, the studio who released Star Trek, was like, hey, we have this property, and people seem to like the space movies. Let's make a movie rather than a series. But yeah, he was a holdover from that, and then he just got dead in the transporter. This movie does seem a lot like they were getting paid per word. Like, you could easily cut a good 40 minutes without affecting the plot at all. It's just so long, and the plot is so lean. Like, there's not that much there. I don't know if they were going for a 2001 vibe, because they missed the mark. One cool thing, when watching the end credits, it feels like it's almost note for note the theme from Star Trek The Next Generation. So, if you guys have watched both things, let me know in the comments what you think. Alright, next we have Wrath of Khan. Khan! Yeah, couldn't resist. Which is a great movie in its own right. Like, Star Trek fandom aside, it's a great film. Like, I feel they might have sat back and been like, the motion picture was meh. Let's focus and make something great before we kill the franchise. There was a meeting to that effect. I watched this one with a commentary on because I've seen it so many times. And the director was really good at like talking about the movie. In this movie, Kirk receives glasses that he'll sell in Star Trek 4, so it's just nice to see like little continuity moments. This was actually directed by the same guy who went on to direct Undiscovered Country, which is one of my other favorites, so he's doing good. Now, they do make an error of Chekhov being able to recognize Khan, which, if you've seen the original episode, The Space Seed, which this film was a sequel to, Chekhov wasn't even in the cast yet, so, like, how does he recognize him? This was only briefly addressed by the director during the commentary, but he really didn't defend it. He was just like, my other complaint is, why are Khan's followers so young? Like, they should all be approximately the same age as him, instead of a good 20 to 30 years younger. It's a little weird. Where am I? There I am. I love the glittery tapestry in Spock's quarters. Apparently neither the director nor Nimoy liked it, but I would love it to have in this room. No, it'd be very cool for these videos. The symbol on the glittery tapestry represents the Vulcan philosophy of infinite diversity and infinite combinations, which was talked about in other classic episodes, if you want to dig those up. I've always just appreciated the thought that we as a society are stronger when we have diversity, and so it's nice to have that front and center in Spock's room. And it's just a nice philosophy in general. This was one of the very first movies with CGI, and although the CGI is dated now, it's used really sparingly, though. Only on the Genesis presentation. So it doesn't really damper the effects in the film. It doesn't distract, because it was supposed to be a computer monitor anyway, so. One thing that is kind of dumb is, was Savick giving him shit saying Kirk never faced death when they were talking about the Kobayashi Maru in the tunnel, in the Genesis cave. Like, bitch, he lost his brother to flying pancakes and his parents to Kudos the Executioner. He faced death, not just a test at Starfleet. Like, not to mention how many red shirts over the decades. Like, quit your judging, Savick. Anyway, next up, we have The Search for Spock, which has a different actress playing Savick. Search for Spock is meh. It's alright. It was directed by Nimoy, but it's really the writing that's terrible. I did not watch it with the commentary on, because I haven't watched it that many times, so I really didn't remember all the scenes as they were coming up, so I wanted to focus on the actual film. Anyways, about half hour into the film, there's tribbles at the bar. And even though, like, had the Klingons hunted them yet? I'm not sure about the exact timeline of the Great Klingon Hunt, Tribble Hunt. Anyways, Sulu wears a cape jacket thing, and he looks so suave. Like, I would buy that in a store. It is such a cool look. Um, Sometimes the Klingons speak English, and sometimes they speak Klingon. It makes no damn sense. They just flip back and forth for no apparent reason. I also think that Christopher Lloyd was incredibly miscast. I did read that he loved the original series, so it must have been an absolute treat for him. However, he never seems like anything other than Christopher Lloyd. It's like, remember that one time where Doc Brown was Klingon? Also, it was nice to see events of the previous movies have a bearing on the events of this film rather than just standalone adventures. Up next we have The Voyage Home. This we watched with commentary because, again, I've seen it so many times. Commentary featured Shatner and Nimoy. So I was geeking out the entire movie. As a result, I really didn't write that much here. Um, yeah, this was the second time Nimoy directed Star Trek film, and clearly he got more confident. Like, I feel like there might have been a lot of studio interference in the previous film. It's just such a delightful film. It had a genuine impact as it drew attention to the hunting of whales. And after this movie's release, many countries banned whale hunting. Recently, I learned that there is a section of the Enterprise D, the ship from Next Generation, that contained tanks for dolphins and whales. And I don't know if that was an allusion to this film, like, was it some of the whales that they saved or their descendants, or did somebody go back for more whales? I don't know. But yeah, for nice stand-up little adventure. I don't think anybody dies in it. It's a nice little palate cleanser after all the explosions of the previous movies. Alright, next we had to endure The Final Frontier, which was directed by Shatner, who is not the best judge of his own performance. One thing that the director of Star Trek II mentioned was that you had to have Shatner do several takes before he would get comfortable and relaxed and not be over the top. So it definitely feels like Shatner looked at it and was like, nope, I'm good enough. First take, let's go. We watched this one on Comcast On Demand, so no commentary available. Being directed and the story written by Shatner, it does leave much to be desired. Where am I? It does have one great scene where DeForest Kelley just breaks your heart. It's a scene where Spock's brother, I can't remember his name, is trying to have Bones share his pain, and it is a genuinely good scene. DeForest Kelley brung it that day. There's a funny scene where Scotty says he knows the ship like the back of his hand, and immediately conks his head. There was a Romulan ambassador named Caitlin Dar. Like, really, guys? You couldn't think of anything more alien sounding than Caitlin? Also, she arrives in a scene directly following a scene where the inhabitant of that planet said there were no starships here. Like, how did she arrive? Also, there is Cybok. That's his name. Cybok, who is Spock's half-brother, because, of course, like, with the population of a whole planet, of course, you're going to run into one of Spock's relatives. Every Vulcan has to be related to Spock somehow. There is also David Warner as a human ambassador in this film. In the next film, he is the Klingon Chancellor. You'll know David Warner from his hundreds of appearances, even if you don't know his name. He was Sark in Tron, and he was like the henchman bodyguard guy in Titanic. I think his name was Lovejoy. I didn't look it up. But yeah. So, Undiscovered Country, Star Trek VI, was directed by the same guy who directed Star Trek II, Nicholas Meyer. He also worked on the scripts of both movies, as well as the script of 4. So, all my favorites. It stands in stark contrast to Shatner's attempt at the previous movie. This was also the first movie after Roddenberry died, and it was dedicated to him. Christopher Plummer is amazing as the Klingon named Chang. You will, of course, know him from The Sound of Music, which was also directed by Robert Wise, who's directed motion picture. There are so many references to World War II history, like obscure history. For example, when the Klingons say you haven't heard Shakespeare until you've heard it in the original Klingon, this is a reference to a Nazi Party belief that Shakespeare was originally written in German and later translated into English. Another example is when when Christopher Plummer's character says, "Don't wait for the translation, answer me now." This is actually something that was said at the Nuremberg trials. So, not common knowledge. I did want to give a shout out to the closed captioning person, whoever programmed that. They had the actual Klingon words showing up. Which half the time it'll say like speaking in a foreign language when it's like, oh, this is a documentary about China. I'm pretty sure they're speaking Chinese. Like, it's not that hard captioning person. But this guy, whoever captioned Star Trek VI, good job. The words of Klingon. The president of the Federation, you'll of course know as Red from that 70s show. His name's Kurtwood Smith. He also guest starred in an episode of DS9 and Voyager, so it's like really entrenched as part of the Star Trek family. Kim Cattrall from Sex and the City. She was actually the first choice for Saavik in Star Trek II, but was unavailable. Is great in a very understated performance as the Vulcan Valeris. I can see why she was their first choice for Saavik. This also features Michael Dorn in a small part as a Klingon lawyer. He's his character Worf's grandfather, so that was cool. I kind of feel like there might have been an allegory of the Chernobyl accident with the accident on Praxis. I mean, the whole film has very obvious end of the Cold War overtones, but I don't know if it's specifically a reference. It ends so perfectly with the final captain's log handing off the torch to the next generation. And the end credits has the cast signatures, which was also something they used in the end credits of Avengers Endgame, which was because the directors of that loved Star Trek VI, loved Star Trek, and wanted to pay it an homage. All right, with that, we finish our travels with the original crew. If you haven't watched them in a while, I recommend the even-numbered ones very highly. The odd-numbered ones, not so much. Enjoy your viewings. Live long and prosper.